No, no. There we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to An Honest Look. Hi, Rick. Hi, Mac. Welcome to our
Hi.
guest, Mac Scotty McGregor. How's everyone doing today?
I'm
Doing
awesome.
great. I say any day I have to get my sunglasses out in Seattle is a good day.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 No, the sun is finally shining where we are right now. I think spring is finally sprung.
Yes.
Is that so? It's kind of up and down in New York City, but it's a grayish, sunny-ish day today here. Anyway, I want to welcome you to the show, Mac. Thank you so
Thank you.
much
Yeah.
for
Welcome,
coming
Matt.
on. We're very, very excited to get to know you. I'm going to introduce you to our audience properly.
Right.
So, Mac is a transgender activist, an author, speaker, and educator that lives in Seattle. He provides gender and LGBTQIA diversity training for corporations, colleges, and groups all over the world. He co-founded Positive Masculinity, a project for heart-led masculine folks who want to create a transformative path for masculinity in our world. Wow.
Yes.
And I've actually read your full bio, and there's a lot more than in this brief summary
Yeah. No
and
kidding.
possibly fit it in. So I'm just going to let you tell us a little bit more about you, and perhaps maybe start with where did it all start for you? What is the story that took you to where you are today, the work that you do today?
Wow. Well, it's been an interesting, adventurous journey that I've had. I was born in the 60s in the Bible Belt. And at 4 and 5 years old, I started changing my name to a masculine name playing with other kids because in my first test of life, they gave me an F when I was born. When a baby's born in the hospital, a nurse looks at a baby and they put what I call the magic letter on a piece of paper that follows you the rest of your life. And that's your gender marker. And most states still have two, right? Choices, an F or an M. And I got an F. But I didn't have any language to explain this. I just knew at 4 and 5 years old that the very Southern Belle type name I was given did not fit who I felt I was, even as a little one. And so my mother had me at 16 years old. So my grandparents were just wonderful and helped raise me in my younger years. And my grandfather and I had a couple of shows that we watched together every week. It was our thing. And one of them was an old Western called Gunsmoke. You might have heard of it, but we watched Bonanza and Gunsmoke together, and Little House on the Prairie. That was another one. But I gave the kids the name of the sheriff in Gunsmoke and told them that was my name, which was Matt Dillon. So when kids would come and knock on the door and ask if Matt Dillon could come out and play, of course, my grandparents thought that was very cute. And I wore a little sheriff's badge and little 6 shooters, and I had a little cowboy hat and boots. And that was just the only way I knew how to explain what I was feeling at the time, right? And I had zero exposure to anyone in the LGBTQ community growing up. And, so then as I grow up, once you get to puberty, things change. People expect you in the South to put on your dress and go to church and be a good girl. And, I found my soulmate, though, at 6 years old. Something you didn't mention in my bio is my long history in the martial arts. And that's my soulmate that I found at 6 years old. And, I call it my soulmate because I truly believe the martial arts saved my life. Because I was a kid with a lot of energy. My mom's on like her 12th marriage now. She was very troubled. We had kind of a revolving door. We got moved around a lot, but the martial arts was my stable, and it was a healthy place and healthy family for me to be a part of. So it gave me a very healthy place to put my energy. And I was really natural at it. I was a natural gifted athlete, and I just took to it, and I was the kind of the kid they had to kick out every night and tell me to go home when they had to lock the doors, you know. So I started winning at every belt level I was at. I was competing and I was winning, and I became the state champion literally in every belt level as I went up. And then at 17, I won the US Open, which is the US Championships, and got my black belt by then. And so then many doors started opening up, and I started traveling all over the United States and then the world competing, because I got an opportunity to be on the US karate team. And that really changed my life, because it got me out of that small little, I went to a Southern Baptist high school and college, got me out of that small little community of the Bible Belt and, very strict, conservative views, and allowed me to see more of the world, and realize that there are more LGBTQ people out there. I wasn't the only one, right? And there's something so comforting when you realize, whatever you are, that you're not the only one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we didn't have the internet to find community back then, so so traveling was the way. And it just really opened my world up. And it gave me such amazing experiences also, of just meeting so many different people, experiencing different cultures. It was just wonderful. And so during that time, I was competing in the female division on the US karate team, and I started becoming an activist for women's rights in sports, of course, because the women's team never got the same anything, the same training facilities, the same opportunities, nothing. Yeah, the same stipends. So that began my activist career, honestly, working for that. And, at the time, I still knew that I was very masculine. I didn't know how to navigate that. And I also knew that they wouldn't have allowed me to compete. I did know there was a possibility to go through a gender transition, but I didn't know where to do that, and I knew that the US Olympic Committee didn't know how to handle that back then. I happened to have really great genetics as an athlete and was able to compete at a world-class level until I was 39.
Wow.
So starting at 6 years old, that's a very long career, and all my awards are in fighting. So it's heavy contact. It's really hard on the body. So I'm grateful for my genetics in that way. But at 39, I competed in the world championships, and, the young 18 and 19-year-olds on the team were calling me the grandparent to the team. And I happened to win 2 medals in that world championships, and thought that'd be a really great time to retire since I was the grandparent.
Talking about breaking stereotypes, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was the oldest male or female on the team at that time. And so I did retire then from competition, and they still, I'm still a certified coach and referee, and that's okay. You can, be transgender and do that, but competing was very different. So that's when I started following my journey. And that's actually what led me to Seattle, because of the fact that my body had been a fine-tuned instrument for me and given me a lot of privilege as an athlete. I wanted to go through gender transition in the healthiest way possible. And doing all the research, Seattle, has people that are doctors and therapists and a community that's supportive, that are, experienced with this. And where I was in the South, there wasn't that same level of competency, right? So that's what brought me here. And then shortly after I got here and began that journey, people, told me of my long teaching experience in the martial arts and experience as a speaker, that they need people with my experience to help explain this journey to folks too.
Right.
And so that actually, I started really quickly after I moved here. I was appointed by the mayor to be on Seattle's LGBTQ commission, which is a commission that advises the mayor and city council for issues around the LGBTQ community. So that was an honor. I was the chair of that commission for quite a while. And I just got very involved. I'm not one to sit in the background or do things quietly, but my whole life has been a study of gender and gender stereotypes because of who I am. And I'm very observant, and I'm a teacher. And so I've studied this from so many angles, that I really examined how we're socialized around all this and how does it affect our lives. And that's what set me on the path to where I am now.
It's it's fascinating. Like, talk about synchronicities a little bit. Like, I was watching a past episode of a TV series show, and it's make believe show. It's not a documentary by any stretch of the imagination, but the subject of the show was on what you're talking about right now. Only it was in sort of a reverse. It was a male transitioning to a female and being part of a basketball team, and it was loosely based on a young girl by the name of Emily or something like that. That was really breaking boundaries around that. What I found interesting and what I was reflecting on, knowing that you were coming on our show today, was it wasn't really easy being there. There was the misunderstandings or the prejudices, the biases that really segregated the school, segregated so many different things. I'm really curious, how are you able to stay in the mental game having that in front of you constantly, or was it constantly?
Oh, it was. I became really great at compartmentalizing. I'll just be really honest about it. And growing up with a mentally ill mother and being the oldest, that also taught me to compartmentalize things too, because I had to help take care of things and pick up the pieces around a lot of things with my mom and take care of my younger brother, and that kind of thing. So I was very good at juggling, and what's happened is since I've retired and coming out of that and, being fully who I am and living in my authenticity is to integrate everything and to try to learn to not compartmentalize. That's been part of my growth journey.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. And really interestingly enough, I graduated from a Southern Baptist high school, and there was only 23 of us in my graduating class.
Oh.
Because this school, they added a grade every year, and we were their first senior class.
Oh, wow.
And so what that means is the teachers knew everything. They were all up in your business. There wasn't enough people for them to be distracted too much, right? What's so interesting about that is I can tell you that many people that I went to school with there have kept in touch with me, and many of them, interestingly enough, not just in my senior class, but in some of the grades under me as well, when someone in their family comes out LGBTQ plus, they contact me and ask for my help to guide them through this. Because and I find, it gives me kind of goosebumps. I think I'm honored that they know they're safe to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But it must have taken a lot of courage to take that step forward and be open about it and just put it out into the world. I wonder what that experience was like. Like what gave you that courage?
Well, I got to a place where my authenticity was more important to me than, playing this game like I'm playing a part in a movie to make other people comfortable.
Right.
One of the things that shocked me is actually the people that gave me the hardest time about it were friends in the LGBTQ community that were gay or lesbian.
Really?
Yes. They, it's really interesting that even within the LGBTQ community, it's just recently that gays and lesbians have started becoming more supportive of the trans part of the community and the bisexual part of the community, because before it was pick a team to the people that were bisexual. They were not very friendly to bisexuals either. And it's just recently that more gay and lesbians have started being supportive of gender nonconforming and trans people. Before, I got told by several friends that were lesbians, like, oh, you're going to become one of those, those, as soon as you take testosterone, you're going to become a male chauvinist. And I was like, how my answer to that, first of all, it shocked me that they would think that.
Yeah.
But my answer to that was, how is that a shot going to erase 40 years of my life experience?
Right.
living as a woman in this world, and as a female, top of my field, how it was treated differently than guys that had the same position. I mean, I could never forget that, right? I will always fight for women's rights because of my life experience. That no shot can change that.
But it's so interesting how, like, I mean, and I always say it's innocent because it's a level of understanding, right?
Yes.
You're coming from a level of your understanding, and to have that experience where, because my level of that community, and having friends and interacting with them about it, it's more inclusive. The umbrella is inclusiveness, and it's probably coming more of that. But I'm surprised to hear how it wasn't necessarily as inclusive in the beginning as one would maybe think. Yeah.
No, it's gotten better, and honestly, I would say one of the effects of Trump's presidency is it brought the community together more, because we had a bigger fight than to fight each other, right? To fight for our basic rights, and also the fact that the trans part of the community and the bisexual part of the community really stood with gays and lesbians to fight for marriage equality, and they saw that. And they saw that we all stood right there. I mean, I was on the front lines fighting for marriage equality, and I think that spoke to them as well.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyway, it's more inclusive now in most areas, which I'm very happy about.
Sounds like very recent too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I would say probably just since marriage equality.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is not something I would have ever thought. I'm really surprised. I'm learning something new. Yeah.
I actually, I have a whole chapter in my book about toxic masculinity and the patriarchy, and how it plays out in the LGBTQ community, because I think it's very important to talk about how some of these biases still play out even within marginalized communities, because we've all been socialized with the same messaging, right? So sometimes when a group is marginalized, the way they feel more powerful is to marginalize someone else, unfortunately.
Divide.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like you said, these biases and the conditioning is something that we all grew up with. I mean, they're so ingrained in society. Let's even take out, like lesbians and gays and all of towards women, women, right?
Oh yeah.
It's ingrained in everything in society, and we don't really realize it until we take a close look at it and realize, we're so not equal yet. We're so not equal. So it's a much greater, broader fight than just, gays or lesbians or transgenders. It's really pretty much everyone against men.
Well, yeah, and be specific against white, straight, cis men. I mean, it really, those are the men in charge that have really made the rules, right? That have been in charge for a long time and have made these rules. And one of the things, when I talk about an inclusive, one of the things I'm talking about, people say, what do you mean when you say positive masculinity? Well, one of the words that I define that with is an inclusive masculinity. And what I mean by that is the old version of traditional masculinity, it wasn't even inclusive of all cisgender guys. It certainly wasn't inclusive of gay guys, right? It wasn't inclusive of guys that were more intellectual or soft, as we would say, right? I mean, you take a guy like Fred Rogers, he wouldn't have been, included in that, right? Because he's not the tough guy, right? So it was very exclusive. And it definitely wasn't inclusive of supporting women either, as you mentioned.
And it's so true. And I know, like, from reading some of your stuff, that you've been involved in politics too. And you're just talking about laws. There's so many laws that are like been there forever that are not equal. There are made by men for men. I've just been through a divorce. Let me tell you, it's shocking when you realize this. It's like, it, but when you come in close contact with it, it's like, how are we still at this point? How is this even still possible that we are obeying by these laws that are clearly not equal, right? They're just, they just really perpetuate beliefs around the role of the woman that are really, really, really like dated. You know, it does not reflect the reality of society today, right?
No,
But
it doesn't.
it's so ingrained in the fabric of society that it's not just about we pass one law and everything's going to change and we all change our minds. We really have to go back and like little by little like entangle ourselves from all of it.
We sure do, and that's why I try to get people to go back and look at the way they were socialized. You know, what was your modeling and messaging around gender, around sexuality? Why do we need to do that? Because it helps form our belief systems,
Right.
which in turn results in how we judge ourselves and the limitations we put on ourselves and how we treat and judge other people that we come in contact with, right? So it has big effects in our lives.
Right, such a good point. It is also about how we judge ourselves. That's such an important point. It's like we even do it towards ourselves without realizing, because it's a conditioning.
Well, like you know, I have a little thing I have in my book about a famous football player, Rosie Greer. I mean, he's back when I was a kid, but he was a big, huge lineman. I mean, a tough guy, right? Yep. And he wrote a book on men and knitting because one of the things he did to center himself and be calm after all that hard playing football and workouts he did was he liked to knit. It just calmed his mind. It was like a meditative thing for him.
Right.
Now, back then, I mean, we're talking in the 70s, right? For a man and a man of color who's a football hero to talk about knitting was a huge thing. But why should it be a huge thing?
So true.
You know what I mean? I mean, I tell people all the time, guess what? Activities actually don't have a gender.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
If you enjoy it, you should be able to do it, right? Yeah. But those are the silly limitations we put on ourselves, right?
Well, even there's an interesting podcast up here about commercials and Under the Influence, it's called, by the way. It's a little plug for our local radio. But in one of the episodes, they were talking about how a lot of these concepts that we think are in sort of ingrained and natural and all this other, like even picking colors pink and blue.
Right.
Of course.
There was a board meeting and a coin toss.
Yes.
But as I grew up, right, like even now I find myself putting on a salmon shirt. Right?
You won't say pink, you'll say salmon.
But in tongue in cheek, right? It's just having that little bit of reflection of a thought coming on. Well, this is a bit of a feminine shirt, or it's a lighter color, or all that kind of stuff, right? You know, because I mean, I grew up probably, you know, in the 60s, along that side. I knew that some of the guys seemed a little softer and they were stronger, and I couldn't figure out where I fit in because I felt I had a little bit of both going on, kind of a thing, right? And I could identify with it, but but it was just it's sort of interesting to as we evolve and as our levels of understanding come around. You know, when I was first introduced with somebody that was considered themselves gay, it was like, okay, now does this mean something to me now? It's like, right? You know, it's like, so tell me more. Like, what does that mean, right? And now we've gotten more, like you talk about separation and divisions, and we talked earlier before we came on the show about the plus side.
Right.
LGBTQIA
plus. Yes.
Right. You know, it is interesting, you know, and I wonder, I'm just curious. I'm just wondering, like, are we evolving this understanding in a more positive way, or are we doing some kind of disservice to it? I'm just curious, like from your point of view.
Well, that's a great question, Rick. And here's the thing, binary systems, which means there are two sides, are put there by folks in charge to keep us all in our lane, whether it be rich, poor, black, white, male, female. And one of the interesting things in binary systems like this is actually I cannot define myself without the other because I'm the opposite of the other.
Right.
I mean, when you think of the traditional male female, I'm the right. You'd say, what is male? What is masculinity? It's the opposite of femininity, right?
Yeah, it's a duality, right?
Right. It's a duality. Yeah. Now, when you find out that there are intersex folks in the world, which means people born with some of both sex characteristics. And now that they've undone the genome, they've discovered 60 variations of this, and they're pretty sure they'll discover more as we go along. I have a friend who speaks with me on many panels that's an intersex woman, and it's so interesting because where I came from in the Bible Belt, right, they want to say God made man and woman, and that's it, right? Well, actually, my first question then is, do you think God makes mistakes? And of course, most people who believe in God will say no. Well, then where do all these intersex people come from? Because there's as many intersex people at least as there are redheads in our world.
Oh, wow.
Just so you understand that it's a lot more common than people realize.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, and in nature, gender isn't binary either. All over nature, they'll show you in the animal kingdom, in plants, there's lots of variation in this. So it wasn't even created to be black and white, to be binary.
No,
right?
No, I totally agree. I mean, like even like for me, there's 8 billion uniqueness elements out there.
Yes.
Right. Yes. And even though, like I was reflecting on this the other day, the fact that there are similarities between all of us, all species, right? You look at, there's 4 limbs, there's 2 eyes, there's 2 ears, there's a mouth, there's a lot of things that you can say we have a lot in common.
Right.
But when you look at the structure of a most common as a snowflake, right? There's a lot of similarities around a snowflake, all made of snow, right?
Yeah.
But you get into the deeper aspects of it, there isn't one that's the same.
That's right.
And I think it's the same, and it's much what I think what Carl Jung was kind of pointing to back in the day, was that it's a spectrum that flows back. It
sure is. That's exactly right.
Right.
Yes.
And I found through my experience, there are times when I need to be masculine and there are times I need to be feminine. Right. And whatever label you want to call that in between, but there's and it's my wisdom that kind of, or my intuition, or whatever you want to call my guide inside that points me into that right direction. I look how I look.
Well, yes, it's a huge spectrum. I think most people understand sexuality as a spectrum, right? And we have that famous book, 50 Shades of Grey. Well, I would say there are 50 shades of masculinity and 50 shades of femininity too. And there's a lot in between, right? At least, right? And it's actually wisdom when we get to the place where we can flow back and forth. I'll take this on another spin from my long history in the martial arts and my bachelor's in Asian history and philosophy. If you talk about male and female, which a lot of people equate it to in the United States, to yin yang energy, right? The yin and the yang, the balance of the opposite types of energy. We all have some of each, but what they would call the more feminine part of that energy of the yin yang is a nurturer, but a nurturer in the way of calming, reassuring, right? That kind of a nurturing energy. And the masculine energy still has nurturing energy, but generally does it in a more action-oriented way, right? Like taking the kid out and teaching them how to fish. That would be nurturing in a masculine way, right? Or something like that. It's just different, but it doesn't mean we all have some of all of that in us, and that helps balance us. And I think realizing that integration and accepting that we have some of both. And that's a gift, because knowing when, like you said, to flow from one to the other is actually when we get to a good place of balance and wisdom with it.
And to accept the fact that either side is not wrong. Like
That's right.
Just because like my dad, he's 93 today, actually. Happy birthday, Dad.
Oh, wow. Happy birthday. Yeah, that's a big number.
In his generation, right? Like his soft side, like even today, is like stifled. It's like, oh, I'm getting all emotional. But we're not celebrating that. In his mind, it's a sign of something.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I like what's happening now as we're evolving in our understanding and in our minds is that we're embracing or celebrating the fact that we can cry, that we can have emotions, that we can have feelings, regardless of who or what we think we are. And also I can get angry and I can get aggressive and I can right?
Yeah. We can do all of that.
One
of the things that Brene Brown says, who I talk a lot about her teachings, because I think she's the guru mama of vulnerability. And one of the things that she says is we have a tendency as humans to think that we are thinking beings that have emotions, but actually we're emotional beings that have the ability to think.
I love that.
Exactly. I love that. That's a mic drop right there, man.
Yeah, it totally is. And I talk about that in my book. It's so important for us to realize that what men traditionally have been told to do, and masculine people, is from the time we're little to shut down that emotional part of ourselves.
Yeah.
Which has resulted in a lot of unhealthy things, including addiction for a lot of guys, right? The highest rate of suicide is among middle-aged men. Depression that men won't go get help for because asking for help is a sign of weakness in that old messaging. Yeah. And also then sometimes that comes out in anger towards those we care about, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Or toward our community when we see these mass, shootings and awful events, because people don't know what to do with all that stuffed down emotion.
Right. There's a quote by he was a bit of a philosopher out here on Salt Spring on the Gulf Islands up here, Sid Banks, and his quote I love saying all the time to people is, if there's one thing that we need to learn is not to be afraid of our feelings.
Yes.
Not to be afraid of our experiences. And that alone could change the world.
Oh, so much.
Yeah,
to sit with it, sit in it. I think one of the things we're not taught, I think the martial arts has given me so many gifts, but that culture, because I was so deeply, been so deeply ingrained in it for so much of my life. The meditation, the ability to sit sometimes with things that are uncomfortable. Training teaches you that, right? And one of the things we in Western culture have a tendency to do is the avoidance game of anything uncomfortable, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Bottling up, just pushing down, avoiding, putting on a smile, Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
Avoidance is a plague. Avoidance, really not showing up authentically with the way we feel, like putting on an identity, a mask, to really fulfill what the expectation is versus who we are. We're expected to show up in a certain way. Within that subject, I also want to point to something else that I'm noticing for that's happening for women specifically, is that because of this disparity in the conditioning and everything that's going on, women have become more masculine in an attempt to now become equal to men, right? So really embodying this masculine energy, and there's so much expectation from women. That's a masculine expectation, especially in when we talk about work and having children, and how quickly, at least here in the United States, 6 weeks, you gotta go back up. You just pop this baby out, and now you gotta go back and back like before, as if nothing happened, and really denying denying something that is viscerally feels wrong to every woman I've ever met, you know. But women do it because that now too is ingrained in society, the expectation that women are now going to be equal by doing things the way men do, you know, by pushing and by being more aggressive in their careers. And that is toxic. Talking about, you know, like that is toxic masculinity that women, in a misunderstanding, it's a misunderstanding, in my opinion, of how we can become equal. It's not by embodying traits that are like the masculine that don't fit us that we're going to become equal, right? It's to me, it's by being able to step into the masculine in a way that feels healthy. That's how we're going, and doing things from the feminine, because ultimately we are, right?
Yeah, we don't, you know, honestly, the boardrooms don't need women coming in offering another masculine type opinion. We need your authentic, you know, perspectives brought to the table instead of trying to emulate what you think will, you know, be okay in that boardroom. We actually need you to shake things up.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, that's often shut down. That's often, you know, like met with resistance, with different expectation, with a lot of projections and a lot of shaming and a lot of, you know, like I want to go back to my divorce, but there's a lot of shaming going on out there, you know, like especially when there's someone in a position of power over you that is very much present still in a place like New York City, which is considered to be very progressive, right? So
one of the things I talk to men about in that really care, because you know, there are men, you know, that are masculine feminists that have women in their life they love, they want to be supportive, they want to be inclusive, is, you know, we, the men like that, need to speak up and stand up with women more in those places instead of just being silent when things like that happen and you get shut down. It's no longer okay to be silent and just think you're not a part of the problem because you're not the one making a sexist joke or shutting a woman down. We have to stand up.
Well,
you know?
Isn't no response a response?
Yes, it is. It is. Yes. And, you know, I actually talk to guys about ways to do that that are that don't enrage the person that you're, you know, if someone, for instance, says a sexist comment and you want to speak to them, my suggestion to men, because some men are afraid another guy will get combative with them, right?
Yeah.
Is to take them aside first, to try the way of taking them aside and saying that statement you made wasn't okay. It wasn't cool. You know, I have women in my life I care about, and I bet you actually do too, and they wouldn't appreciate that. You know, and just say something, but taking them aside instead of at first making them lose face in front of a crowd will change the dynamic.
100%.
You know, yeah.
So I'm curious though, that the getting back to that 39 yourself there. Yeah. You were talking about it that particular moment, and I think this is part of the equation or the answer of what we're talking about right now, is this notion of authentic self.
Yeah.
And from your point of view, how important is it to honor your authentic self? Because I think part of what Fatì was talking about with the boardroom is you're going in with a persona that you think you need to be,
right,
which is not your authentic self, and therefore is very awkward, overbearing, over everything, right? You know, kind of a thing. So it's not working. So can you speak a little bit about this notion of like, what is it to be authentic, and what are we actually pointing to?
Yeah, you know, and I think that's a lifelong journey, finding our authenticity. It's not something that just you flip a switch and you have it all together. And I also think we have to read the room. You know, I do think that there are places it may not be totally safe to be our full authentic self. So I do think it's important to read the room. So you know, where are the safe spaces?
But that's an interesting thing you're saying though, because I I'm going to be a little controversial. I'm going
Sure.
to say, why would that not be, where you, because as soon as you're not authentic,
yeah,
you are now in that pleasing. I'm trying to adjust
mm-hmm.
the circumstances now,
right,
to make it work. And so
mm-hmm.
I find it worse when I'm not. Let me put it that way.
I would agree with that, and I'm going to offer this.
Okay.
As someone who lived 40 years in that female experience and is a trans person, and there are times you have to evaluate your safety. I will tell you that. And I'm talking about your safety physically and maybe the safety of your career, that you need to have your ducks in a row before you do something that might get you fired or ousted, or, so you do, I still, even as a martial arts champion, as a trans person, because I'm so open and out, I've had death threats. I still evaluate my safety.
Right.
But I mean, as somebody who grew up, in that female experience, that's a very common thing that women have, that they think about all the time. They're constantly evaluating their safety in a room. If a woman is one woman in a room full of men, that is not always a safe space.
No.
I mean, the number one predator to women is men.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna stand by that. Actually, as a woman, I mean, I've also met women that didn't feel safe with proclaiming their pregnancy because they might lose their job.
That's right.
I found myself in a room with a judge where it was not an equal position, or I didn't feel safe to be my authentic self, and it really, really, really hurt. But that was the truth of that moment, and there was no choice in that moment. I had no choice in that moment, right? But to just sit there and just hear the projections and everything that was being thrown on me, right?
Yes.
So you can make a broader choice to remove yourself from that situation at some point. But I guess this kind of begs the question of, how do we change this world where we either have to show up with that aggressive masculine to be on par with men, or we might just be pushed out, because those are the two options, right? So I think that's a great question.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be easy to create this change. And I've never shied away from hard work, which is why I'm involved in this. But I think we have to look for every opportunity possible to be our full authentic self.
Right. Absolutely.
Every time we can. And even, Rick, when we're talking about that, it brings me back to one of the things I've done with Positive Masculinity is create a safe container for men and masculine people to share what's really going on for them with one another. And most men don't have many friends that they feel safe sharing what's really going on with them, their feelings. I'm talking about feelings. Yeah. Most men talk about sports and work with their buddies, right? They don't talk about anything real, or very little that's real. And that's one thing we as masculine people can really learn from women, is because in most women's friendships, they actually share the emotional load with one another and lift each other up and care for one another. And men have a tendency to be very surface in that and don't get the support, which is one of the things I think that contributes to the high suicide rate in middle-aged men, because they don't have those deep friendships to lean on, right? Where they feel like they can really share what's going on. Men have trouble sharing when they're sad, when they're grieving. We all do that. Men think we have to be strong 24/7. There's no possible way to do that. It's not humanly possible.
No. And it's interesting. Like my background is in emergency services, and I often hear people that are in crises would say, well, management, which is mostly, it was a very male dominant world, right? Fire chiefs and various other things, right? They would say, like, nobody seems to care, because when you're in a crisis, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for, where's the care? Where's the compassion, right?
Yeah.
and I came to a realization because we experience that individually, like
Yes.
because we have as men been sort of isolated from that side, conditioned, however you want to put it. It's very uncomfortable, and when things are uncomfortable, we're going to try and avoid them.
Right.
And
yes.
right, because it's it's uncomfortable. Don't you have somebody else to talk to? Kind of thing.
Yes.
Right. So I think,
Yeah.
and I know that you've worked with Seattle Police and various other things,
Yes.
and I know there's a big push on, because the suicide rates are extremely high, all genders in that thing. But it's really, we really have an awkward time with that emotion. Like it just seems so uncomfortable. So I'm curious, with your book or with your training, how does positive masculinity kind of work in with that, to create a better understanding?
Well, we're teaching workshops and things all the time. I'm teaching in a program that Seattle Police Department has recently launched just this last summer called Before the Badge, which is a really amazing program. It's pretty revolutionary, and now there's a lot of departments looking at it, wanting to emulate something like this in other places. And what this is it's a 6-week course that every new officer has to go through before they go into the academy, and it's all about training on sensitivity. Basically, they get training on from the community of color. They get all kind of training about LGBTQ history and gender. I come in and teach about gender and different facets of the community. The immigrant community teaches a section. And what they're learning is why some of these communities may be leery about working with the police. What's the history there? Why some people don't trust the police, so that they have some compassion when they go into these places for folks, instead of, just, being, hard shelled about it. I mean, a lot of these groups in these communities and parts of our community have real reasons to be leery of trusting the police, right? Yeah. And so this gives them some background and understanding, especially because with Seattle Police Department, we now have officers coming, we have recruits coming from different states, because our department pays better. And, it's a larger department that people are coming from, states that don't have the diversity we do, frankly, in this area, and they're not used to it. So they need this. I think every department needs this education, but coming here, it's going to be a bit of a shell shock, when they're coming from a small town in Arkansas or something to the vibrant diversity of Seattle, right? So, but it's really revolutionary. I mean, people, the feedback we're getting is just amazing, from these recruits of, and they're asking some great questions, and, hopefully this makes a big difference when they're actually out on the street, the way they interact with people. That's the hope,
Well, I don't think, like, if from what you've shared with us in this episode, and and if the training is just has any of these elements, it can't help but make a change, right?
Yeah.
Because again, it's a misunderstanding the unknown, right? And you're making the unknown known, and making it in a way that creates the safety around it. So
Well, yeah, and also something to think about when officers on the street, don't have any of this training and background, and the only time they come into contact, let's say, with a person from a part of the community they don't know anything about, is when they're in a crisis.
Yeah.
Right? They're not getting to know anything about this community in a relaxed setting where they get to know them as people, everyday people, right? One of the things I told the officers, I said, look, there's a gay officer that teaches the LGBTQ history. Him and I co-teach together in our section of gender and sexuality. And I said, guess what? Him and I did last night when we went home the same things you did. We had to make dinner, walk the dog, take out the trash. we're all basically, you know, want the same things in life, right? We want to feel safe in our community. We want to have access to healthcare and education. And, you know, it's really comes down to we're much more the same than we are different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a key message right there.
Seeing one another's humanity. Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's in that right there, in these little things, through these small changes, little by little, that's where the change is going to start to come, right?
Yes.
And you know, like, I know that social media can be controversial, but it has helped spread information. You know, the fact that we also sat down during COVID, having nothing more to do than consume information through the internet, or, you know, like, it has helped create more awareness in people. Like, people are much more a part of the conversation of how do I better myself and how do I self-love, because it is through that suffering that we've been forced to look for answers, right? When we wouldn't have otherwise, right? So I think in a sense, COVID really evolved us as a species, and it's perhaps the starting point of those. You know, it may not happen over like 10 or 20 years. It may be like 1 or 2 generations away, but it is through those really like changing one by one, like minds one by one, that I think all of this is going to finally.
I think that there are a lot of silver linings, you know, that we've gotten from that experience of the pandemic. I mean, you know, one of the things is I actually think people take their mental health and their well-being more seriously.
Exactly.
And they take that into account even with a job, right? Is this job supporting my well-being and mental health? You know,
to be really authentic in this work.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Am I working in a place that I feel supported to be my authentic self? I mean,
Right.
that's, yeah.
And I understand, you know, there's a thing called common sense that has to play into it, right? You know, but it does beg that question. Like, you could, if you're not being authentic, then who are you being?
Yes.
Right? And what is the feelings that are backing that up? Like,
Yes.
if you cannot get out of bed in the morning looking forward to, right, then I would challenge that you're probably not being authentic, that you're taking something else other than yourself, and you're up against that all the time. And if you're always up against the wall, yeah, you're naturally not going to want to be there. You're going to be argumentative. You're going to go and lean towards what your preferences are, and an overused strength will become your weakness, and it never works out, and then you wonder why, right? So, you know, I love your story. It's almost, I was going to say Cinderella, but I'm not even sure that. But you know what I mean? Like, it's a hero's journey. Like, you literally fell into, like you said right in the very beginning, you fell into a sport that was so supportive of you, that provided you with a path that, right, you know, and
Well, and it also, interestingly enough, you know, growing up in the South, again, in the Bible Belt, it gave me a place to express my masculinity.
Yeah,
that was safe.
It was perfect for you.
And even celebrated, right? Because I mean, as a fighter, I was out there, you know, training hard and being, you know, and it was celebrated, you know, so.
almost natural in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. But also the experiences it gave me, you know, just as a facilitator and a teacher and somebody that has, you know, one of the things you do in the martial arts is, you know, you really hone at the level I'm at, you know, you've really honed your observation skills, because, you know, you have to be able, I've also done a lot of bodyguarding work from my history in the martial arts. I was, you know, bodyguard for many famous people for a while. And, you know, that ability to read people and understand where they are, those are things that came from my martial arts training that are just, they're just invaluable. You know, and spatial awareness, just things that I watch some people walk in the world and I'm going, oh my God, they have zero spatial awareness. They just go to the mall and watch people. You're just like, how did they survive walking in the world every day?
but you know, like, you know, this you got to be your authentic self real early when you think about it.
Parts of me, yes.
Parts of
Yes.
you, like, you know,
Yes.
like, and I don't know if you ever came across, there's a really, I think it's the number one YouTube video, by Sir, it's a teacher, Robertson, Sir Robertson. Anyway, he
Okay.
passed away not recently, but he talks about a young girl that the parents were didn't know what to do with, and it was therapy and all this other kind of stuff. She wasn't doing well in school, and so they kind of left her in the room alone, and they were watching her, and he looked and he goes, she was dancing and she was moving, and she didn't need to be sitting in a corner of a desk for hours and hours trying to learn something. She needed movement.
Yeah.
and
I was
and so she
I was
became,
that kid too. Yeah.
well, exactly, you know, exactly. But if we grabbed you and said, no, 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 we're going to mold you into
Your
what's normal,
ballet shoes, put your ballet shoes on, right?
right?
You're gonna fit.
That was the hardest thing about writing a book is I'm a moving meditator, right? I do Tai Chi or I
Yeah.
walk and I meditate, you know. Yeah, the hardest thing was all the hours of sitting it takes to write a book and
Right.
get through that.
But
You
you
know,
did.
but what
Yeah.
I did it because, you know, I can set a goal and do anything. That's one of the things from being a world champion, and something it teaches you that discipline. But what I did was I also learned to take healthy breaks and take my dog for a walk or go out and exercise a little bit and come back, you know. Yeah.
Understanding self. Yeah. Perfect.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yes.
Ooh.
What an hour. So, you know, as we're coming to the end of this hour, I wonder if there's something that you would like to add that we should have asked you that we didn't ask you, something that you want to, a tip or something that you want to leave our audience with. And then just maybe you want to tell us about your book or anything that you want to speak to.
Sure. You know, one of the things that I urge masculine people to do is to put down the competitiveness, because that's another message that we get a lot, is that it's kind of a lifelong game of king of the hill. You know, a game we played as a kid, right?
Yeah.
But it's always one of the reasons I think that men don't share openly as much with one another, because we're taught we're always in competition. And I will tell you from somebody who's been a warrior in battle, is you don't want to show your weaknesses to your competitors. You know, that's just normal, right? For any competitor. But one of the messages I really try to get through to masculine folks, to men, is that we can be so much stronger when we collaborate. And that's not a message we hear often enough.
Nope.
Yeah.
Right. Not
Yeah,
not in the male
ways.
perspective, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Find ways to collaborate, and not just with other men, but to collaborate in general.
Right.
You know, and we will be stronger and be able to accomplish more together that way. So that's you know, one of the big messages I'm talking to people about. We have a big announcement I just made today that we are starting on our website, positivemasculinitynow.org, where folks can go on there and nominate a positive masculine role model in their life. And we're going to feature a positive masculine role model each month on our website and in our social media, because, you know, one of my messages in life is that I think we hear enough negative news. And it's not that I want to brush it off and not acknowledge that there are bad things that happen. And of course there are, but I don't want to focus on that. I want to move us toward, you know, something healthier, right?
Yeah.
So shining a spotlight on good men in the world that are doing good things, we don't hear enough about that. And so I just, you know, I would urge your listeners and you all to go on and nominate someone that you know is a positive masculine role model, and let's feature them. Let's shine a light on them. Let's thank them for doing that. You know?
Wonderful idea. Wonderful idea.
Love that. So I put in all your links website, all your information in the chat. It's going to be there. It's going to sit there on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. I want to encourage our audience to get in touch with you. If they have any questions, to go check out your book, check out your website, and nominate someone
Yes.
for as a positive masculine role model. Yeah, and I want to really thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
I
Thank
learned
you.
so much from this conversation, so much that I didn't know, and for the work that you do.
Oh, thank you all for having me. I do want to also just mention that I'm working right now on the audio book, and that's a whole separate process, right?
Yeah.
And that, so we're expecting that to be out in June. So, you know, I've been in the studio. It's a long process. You know, I'm doing it myself. So, yeah.
You were not kidding when you said you get stuff done, huh?
Well, I have a team. I have a wonderful team that helps with all that, and I'm very grateful for them. And you know, I have a lot of young interns working for Positive Masculinity that are just amazing. And I will tell you that on days that it's, you know, that I have a hard time, they reinvigorate me with their passion about the message and what we're doing to make a difference in the world.
That's wonderful. And so thank you to them too. Thank you for all the work that you do. It does take a village, right?
Yes, it does. It sure does.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, amazing. Continue to do the incredibly important work that you're doing. Stay in touch. Thank you again for coming on An Honest Look. Thank you to our audience. We want to invite you to subscribe, to support our show, share this episode if it resonated with you. Help us amplify our impact. Follow us, and see you next week.
Thank you.